it's actually easy to talk about what has happened, but what we're going to do now is talk about what will happen. So, it'd be nice to have a drum roll there. Anybody have that on their drum roll? You have drum rolls? No, okay. So we have Data Modeler 2020. So it's interesting. What is the world going to be like in 2020, and what is data modeling going to be like? And so to help answer this question, we brought 3 thought leaders in, and we're going to introduce each of them. And for fun, we thought we would introduce each of them using their baby pictures. So I'm going to share with you a baby picture, and you shout out, who is this? And I'll give you a choice. It's either going to be Dan, Hans, or Lars. And I'll show you the first one. Let's see who can guess it first. Everyone said Dan. It is Dan. Dan, come on down. You're the first contestant. Yay, all right. Thank you, Dan. So Dan is the inventor of the Data Vault. He's written how many books so far?
3.
3 books, and one's coming out has come out, or is coming out very, very soon. And he's been doing a lot of training, he's been doing a lot of consulting in the Data Vault, and so this is Dan, and now we're going to introduce, guess who the second speaker is? I'll give you a hint. He's wearing the blue hat in the picture. Who? Yeah, Hans. Come on down.
Who guessed that?
Wow, very good. Come on down. You're the next contestant.
So the hair didn't throw you off? No?
And Hans has to explain why there's a pet giraffe in his backyard, but that's another. We'll talk about that maybe tonight over dinner.
It's a Swedish thing.
It's a Swedish thing. Okay, good. So
we all have them.
So Hans is a leader in the Data Vault, and he invented ensemble modeling, and he is president of Genesee Academy. And we're also going to choose who is the third. No. Yeah, that's a good check. That's a good guess. It is Lars. Come on down, Lars.
Thanks.
Yes. So Lars is the inventor of anchor modeling, and he also has been data modeling, consulting, and training for many years. And it's really exciting because this is the first time, I think, in history that all 3 of you are on the same stage next to each other, which is wonderful. So why the keynote 2? Why Dan? Why Hans? Why Lars? They're each innovators. And if you look at their accomplishment in the past, you each found certain areas that needed work, and you were able to see that, identify that, and come with a solution. Data Vault, ensemble, anchor modeling, and so you're the perfect people to talk about, okay, now that you've innovated in the past, how can we innovate ourselves in the future? So we're going to open it up for questions, and I already asked a few of you, think of the most difficult questions you can about the future. Has to be around data modeling. You can't ask for what the winning lottery numbers are going to be in tonight's lottery, or what stocks to buy or sell.
Steve, they can ask, but we might not have the right answer to that one.
I would like to know, actually. So actually, and we have, actually I'm going to hit this. I'm going to turn this off so it's less light in your eyes. And we have a couple of questions people already submitted. So the one about the giraffe, thank you for answering that one, Hans. So,
yeah, you got one done already. That's amazing. Yeah.
So I'm going to start off with a question, and then we're going to pass the mic around. And this is an amazing opportunity to ask the 3 leaders about what things are going to be like in 2020. So the first question is a bit overview question. What will Data Vault and anchor modeling look like in 2020? That's the first one. Who'd like to start?
Go ahead. All right, I'll start.
Well, actually, you have one already,
Yeah,
so you're good.
Okay. Yeah, so I think that in 4 years' time, it's only 4 years until 2020, I don't think that much will happen when it comes to anchor modeling and Data Vault with respect to database technology. If you look at it, some of the things that we do by modeling the data, a proper or very advanced database engine could actually do. But I don't think it's not on the agenda for any of the vendors right now, but maybe in 2020 they're starting to think about what we're doing and starting to see that these are pretty smart things, and maybe we can do some of these things internally in the databases. That's what I see in 2020 when it comes to anchor modeling and data vault. And of course, I also think that we're growing. We're both having a good trend now and seeing a lot of momentum around the techniques. So I think it's growing techniques. And I think other techniques that may be on the decline a little bit are perhaps dimensional modeling. Data vault and anchor modeling were built on principles engineered from how information actually properties of information, whereas dimensional modeling is built around and engineered around hardware limitations that you wanted to have faster queries. And that, by definition, means that it has a certain lifetime. So I think we're going to see a momentum where we're continuing to grow and gain ground.
So just a follow-up on that. So your question about the vendors, do you see those vendors being the more non-relational technology type vendors, or who are those vendors?
It's hard to say. I think mostly the relational ones, because we are relational based. But also I have been approached by other types of vendors also that likes maybe some part of anchor modeling that they want to incorporate, like graph databases. They like our graphical interface that we have, stuff like that.
Thank you. Would you like to add, Dan or Hans, to that?
Sure. I mean, I think Data Vault, Anchor, the modeling paradigms are definitely right now seeing huge growth. So if you kind of watch what happened with Netherlands, how many people here from Netherlands? Raise your hand. Okay, you're infiltrating, right? Okay, so that's a huge part of it. It's like the adoption curve is such that it really starts to grow. And just looking at the last few years, the adoption rate is crazy. So I think if we look into 2020, I think the predominant technique for going projects in data warehousing will be some kind of ensemble, whether it's going to be something like Anchor or Focal or Vault. Vault's got a huge lead, obviously, so that's a big one. I think beyond that, and I think we'll get to this question a few times during this session, is I see the modeling itself getting to be more focused on the conceptual and logical, especially as we're going into a lot of the big data platforms. And I think physically we're going to be separating ourselves somewhat more with how we deploy, but probably the logical and conceptual part will become even more important to be based on some kind of Vault or Anchor approach.
Interesting. Dan, would you like to add anything to that? Or?
Sure, I'll add a little bit. Hans and Lars covered almost all of it. My opinion is that today, at least between today and 4 years from now, which isn't that far off, we will see an uptake in skills needed for what I call physical storage modeling. If you look at any of the NoSQL vendors, and I'm saying non-relational NoSQL vendors, relational NoSQL vendors are a different ballgame. Graph databases, different ballgame. But if you look at the non-relational NoSQL vendors, you better understand compression and MPP and how to split your data and what vertical partitioning means and all these other things. Otherwise, you're not going to get the performance out of those machines that you think you deserve. So that's one thing. I think our jobs are going to change. I think we're going to see a return, or hopefully a return to some core information engineering aspects. A lot of people have seen that fade away, and some folks weren't even taught information engineering going into this field. And I think the conceptual and the logical are going to take off. I think taxonomies and ontologies are where it's hot and where it's at, and I think we're going to see a lot of those questions next year.
Thank you, Nan. Thank you. We have a few more on the list, but I'd like to open it up to questions. Don't all raise your hand at once. Who would like to ask a question here? I can move on to the second one on the list. Anybody?
Steve, feel free to call on them. I mean,
okay, so.
Yeah.
All right. Who's okay? Oh, okay. Oh, I call on JP. You know what? I'll give you the mic so everybody could hear you. Okay. JP is actually the author of the FCOIM book.
I'm glad to hear that you preview an increase in the interest in conceptual modeling. We've seen a decrease at our University of Applied Sciences in later years. What do you think? Why do you think this breach in trend might be caused by?
You guys mind if I take that one first?
No, go.
My personal opinion on that, and this is just an opinion, is that people have been too focused on the vendor hype about how you store things physically. Oh, it's columnar. Oh, it's key value store. Oh, it's graph database, or it's this, it's object oriented. And so this is where the fray has happened, and a lot of people have lost focus on the concept levels. I think there will be a return to the concept levels only because businesses can't make sense of their data if they don't identify it and categorize it. And that's where a lot of people have been secretly saying, well, look, I need to value my data as an asset on the books, and how do I do it? That's the wrong question. The right question is, how do I value my information as an asset on the books? And how do you get from data to information? The only way that I'm aware of, and correct me if I'm wrong, somebody out there might have a different opinion, but the only way I'm aware of is to turn that data into information, and the only way to do that is to categorize it and attach it to business meaning and value-add asset definitions at the top level. That's my answer, but I don't know. They may have a different opinion.
No, I agree, and I also have another explanation. I think also that data modeling has become sort of compartmentalized a little bit, because if you look at it look at programmers, programming went from where you had a single programmer that had to understand what the business wanted and created the program and built it to the specifications. These days, programmers get a specification sheet, and they produce that little piece of code that the definition says that they should do. And it's becoming a little bit like that with data modeling, at least in Sweden anyway, where you can see it where data modelers are sort of creating models by specification rather than trying to understand the business needs. And somewhere in between those two, you have the conceptual modeling level. So it's a little bit lost there.
One other quick thing on that too. I think the data modeling in general, like we were saying, I think is becoming more conceptual and logical as a general trend. And part of it is just the business understanding. And I think with all the schema on write versus schema on read, you recognize, well, of course, we can't use it if we don't understand it. I was just reading something from Len Silverstein. He said, if you don't understand the data, it can only be less meaningful, right, or less useful. And that's definitely true. So I think if you look at big data as being, I don't know, potentially a bad term in the industry from the perspective that it's interpreted so many different ways, but what's really good about it is the awareness that it's created. So many more people are aware of the need for good data, and in that we need to understand how it works and what it is, and we can only do that with good conceptual modeling. So.
Thank you. Next question. The person wearing the M&M hat. There's only a couple hundred in the whole world.
Hi, I'm Danny from Dörfler & Partner. So I just heard out of the one of the answers talking about smaller chunks, programming and modeling wise. How is Agile going to go into that in 2020? Which direction is Agile going?
Hopefully we want a certain answer here.
Well,
Thanks.
I'll start with that one then, since I was the one who said it. Yeah, I think Agile, because we're seeing an emergence now of techniques like data vault and anchor modeling that supports the Agile style much better than previously. If you look at old types of data modeling, they were usually a bottleneck that you had to pass before you could get any further in your projects. It's not like that these days. You can start small and continue to grow a model over time. And I even go as far as saying that we're having a new paradigm right now where we shouldn't be trying to build models that last. Models should not be built to last. They should be built to change, and only then can they truly last. So I think there's nothing wrong with actually modeling smaller chunks, but you still need to keep track of what it is you're actually modeling. You need to have that business understanding and the conceptual level of it as well.
Next question. All right, I'm going to take one off the list then. What do you think will be the role of industry reference models in 2020? So it actually ties it nicely into Lars' comment just now, where you're building models to last. So where do these industry reference models, do you think, fit?
Yeah, well, if you look at them, or the ones that I know of anyway, they are quite monolithic in the way they are thinking, and they are definitely models that are built to last, trying to be a little bit generic, trying to manage many concepts at once. It's like you want the model to be perfect from the start and you don't have to touch it ever again. That's the way I see most industry models today. So I think they also need to adopt agility and become more agile, become more of skeleton models, maybe conceptually, only on the conceptual level, and you can fill in the logical later on.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on that?
Sure. I can speak from my customer perspective. My customers are sunsetting their logical models. And by that I mean they have them and they're cutting the yearly funding to the manufacturers that they purchased them from, or the vendors that they bought them from. And the vendors are complaining, well, that's $15 million a year, or that's $3 million a year, or $5 million a year in support that's gone. But the point is, they are a fundamental aspect of gaining an understanding of where the business needs to have some sort of data representation or information that's captured. But once you've got it, it's base knowledge. And from there, you build organically. So to kind of finish up what Danny's question was, in terms of agile and scope, everybody seems to forget, or if they don't understand agile, they seem to forget that agile means that you need to scope things properly and build organically. I'm with Lars on that one. It's an organic build out from the start, and you build in small chunks. But these monolithic models are nothing more than a reference guide. And once you've got them, that's pretty much it. So if you don't have one, you can get away with Len Silverstone's Universal Data Model book and start there. But that does not mean that you will build your models at a physical level. And be careful here. Physical data models doesn't mean physical storage. They're two separate things, at least with the NoSQL engines these days. So that's the thing to watch out for.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Next question. So I actually have one too, which ties to a tools comment that was made earlier, but which data modeling tool is going to be around in 2020? Are all three, are the three big ones going to be around, or do you envision one overtaking the other based on what you're seeing in the industry? That's a loaded question.
Nobody wants to answer that
I'll
one.
answer it. I'll answer it.
No, we can do that.
I think as long as money's being pumped into R&D by these companies into the data modeling tools, they'll continue to be around for quite some time. I think maybe 8 or 9 or 10 years.
Okay.
They still hold value in terms of speed of development. So data modeling tools, I think the ones that will move to the forefront are the ones that tie conceptual modeling and information engineering to the other spaces, as well as fill in the bottom end of the physical storage. And by physical storage model, what I'm talking about is if you go into columnar, you get down into the layers of vertical partitioning, but then you also get into the storage of the file system. And so there's more modeling in NoSQL than you can throw a stick at. If you get into, and you can attest to this, you wrote the book on MongoDB. So, you know, you get down into these levels where you think NoSQL equals no modeling, and that couldn't be further from the truth. So I think the ones that will come to the forefront, and I've seen a few brand new modeling tools that are Java-based and cloud-based, and I think that's the future. I've seen a couple of modeling tools. There's one here today with a vendor whom, if you want to know the name, see me afterwards, that I really like, that offers some interesting ties between conceptual modeling all the way down to the physical levels. And what the evolution should be in these modeling tools isn't just build a data model and hand over a spec anymore. It should be all the way through to generation and automation inside of our information warehouses or information data stores, whatever you want to call it.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. Great. Let's see, next question on the list. Actually, another one is, so what's the relationship, do you think, in 2020 between data modeling and data governance? Do you think that relationship between the two is going to become stronger, or do you think we're going to see a diversion? What's your thoughts on that?
Sure. I mean,
they both pointed to you.
Nobody wants it. Okay. Yeah. No, I would say, I mean, I think data governance, if you think about what's happening with data altogether right now, modeling, conceptual modeling, logical modeling, understanding the data, we have so much more of it. I don't remember the exact session it was, but some of that was talking about the psychology of data, which I thought was kind of interesting. If you kind of look at data as a person, and maybe they're sociopathic. Maybe they're going to convey things they shouldn't convey to people at the wrong time. And I think that's one of the risks of some of the things we can do in applying data and using it in the future. So issues around governance will become, I think, even broader and bigger and more profound for us as we go forward. And I think it ties perfectly in with the focus on conceptual and logical modeling. So understanding what it is we have. This kind of makes the schema on read a little bit scarier when you think about it, because if we're applying it in this, for example, like in a self-service arena, yeah, we can kind of risk some misuse, some issues with how we interpret, and maybe once that's communicated outward, there's some risk associated with that. So we should probably see a pretty strong focus, and that's definitely in the 2020 near-term view. I think it has to be. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Hi, I have a quick question on the future trends as you see it in the area of data warehousing. I just heard Lars was saying dimensional modeling may not be around or it may be minimized. So what do you see as the future trends in 2020, specifically in the area of data warehousing?
In data warehouse or data modeling?
Data warehouse.
Data warehouse? Oh, and data modeling. Well, I tend to think that a lot of these physical optimizations, I agree with Lars, the physical optimizations that Star Schema offer will be embedded in the products underneath. And they will disappear from the I have to build it kind of data modeling to the it's automatically guessed by an engine as an optimization of choice for the kind of query that's happening. But that may not be in 2020. That may be in 2025 or 2030, okay? So that's a ways out. Some of these automations have to rely on neural networks and learning systems, and we're seeing the rise of a lot of learning systems. I think that's going to change the entire data modeling landscape at a physical level. At a logical level, we humans are still responsible for understanding and identifying our data. So from my perspective, in terms of the trends, and to tie it back to what Hans just provided as the last answer, how many of you, by show of hands, know what a data lake is? Okay? And this is not a self-incriminating question, because the next question is how many of you would rather describe it as a data dump? Okay? Yeah, see, this is the point. The customers today that we deal with don't understand modeling, so they're dumping things into the data dump. To make sense of it, to turn it into information, you have to model it some way, somehow. You have to either conceptually orient it, or organize it, or stratify it. A lake, even in the real world, a lake is stratified. So to answer your question, at least to come back around to that, I think we're going to see an evolution of realization that data as an asset on the books can't be utilized or even measured or even pondered until or unless it's organized and categorized. And I think that's where machine learning is going to start helping with some of the physical data modeling aspects that we deal with today, because we think we know better than the machine as far as performance goes. So that's my opinion. I think that's an evolution, not an overnight change.
May I add something also from a business perspective? I think there's a lot of data warehouses that sort of outlived their lifetime out there right now. And I also, so that's also one big business opportunity that's out there, because there's going to be a lot of, over the next 4 years, data warehouses that are going to need to be rebuilt from scratch. And I also think that when modelers start to gain a better understanding of temporality, for example, how to manage that in their data warehouses, that's also going to be a driving force for actually rebuilding your stuff to take advantage of that type of knowledge and features.
Okay. I'd like to just add a question on top of that too, which is, so you mentioned that a lot of data warehouses are slowly outliving their lives, they're going to be rebuilt. Question is, today, do you start to see more of your implementations be driven by existing systems or by requirements, almost like a bottom-up or top-down approach? And do you see that trend becoming more towards bottom-up, reverse engineering, or top-down?
Should be, or what it is. I mean, I think I think it becomes profound clear now that you really have to be looking at the top down. So I mean, you have to look at what the business is actually doing. I don't think it's so much a requirements thing as it is a getting an understanding of what the business actually is and how it works from a core concept perspective.
Okay,
And
so
with
just a
that-
question there. So top
yeah.
down, and you also mean more holistic than a project.
And more holistic,
Okay.
but definitely business facing way before you get into the discussion on what sources you have.
Interesting.
So not source centric so much.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Steve, may I? Okay, in addition to that, and I agree with Hans on that one, what my customers are seeing, in case you want to know what I'm seeing in my customers, I'm seeing a top-down architecture. So the rebuilds, the greenfields, moving on to Data Vault, for instance, they're going at it from the customer. And they're frequently telling me, you know what, we've had the information model or the common model for 15 years or 5 years or 10 years, and it's frozen. We can't do anything with it. It's too big, it's too monolithic. So they're top-down architecture, but then they're coming back with Agile. And that's where scope comes in. And those of you going to attend my session, that's a pitch for my session, sorry, but you will hear more about it. But in terms of that, it's a bottom-up implementation style. And that's where the new
That's
modeling
interesting.
techniques really help. That's my opinion anyway, so. Lars?
I agree. Bottom-up implementation, but top-down conceptualization.
Follow-up questions on that one? Okay, a couple. Let's go over here.
What are your views on incorporating privacy and security in modeling right now? Because that's going to be a big issue when you connect all the data.
All right, I'll go first.
Thank you.
I think not enough attention has been paid to that subject. That's a very good question. I don't think it has to do much with the modeling. I mean, from my modeling aspects and from Data Vault and Anchor modeling aspects, you can do it in both. It's a matter of encryption and understanding encryption and decryption, and it's a matter of where you put those privacy components. It's also a matter of how you physically partition. Now, I don't mean create table partition by. That's not what I'm talking about. By partition, I mean splitting across multiple machines. And some machines have logins that are allowed for certain people that carry certain data, and other machines don't, and they carry other data in the corporation. So that's a different level of partitioning. That's an architectural design. I've spent a good part of my 25 years doing things for the Department of Defense, the National Security Agency, and a lot of government clandestine agencies that I can't tell you about or I'd have to kill you. But the point is, security is there. People have done it in both of our techniques, and it's now coming of age in the commercial organizations, and I applaud that effort. Lars?
Yeah, well, we're also seeing vendors that say that you can have part of your information in-house and you can push some of it out into the cloud. And that opens up a whole lot of new aspects when it comes to security and privacy. And also a lot of services today are cloud-based, and you put a lot of personal information across country borders and stuff. So I recently worked with a company in Sweden who wanted to buy a product from France, and some of the information was going to be stored in France for their customers. But that turned out to be okay because the EES, they were both part of EES, and then it's okay. But we couldn't have put it in the United States, for example. So there's a lot of those political issues as well that we have to take into consideration.
Yeah, one other quick thing too, I think, is if you bring it back to modeling discussion a little bit, is, you know, with all these techniques like Ensemble, we practice kind of a decomposition of the different table forms. And that separation, logical and physical, and deployment, however you want to look at it, gives us a new tool set for being able to do some more of the kind of separation of these things that may have implications for privacy, may have implications for security. And so, yeah, we have, I think, physically tool sets that can deal with it. That's definitely, really, we have to. But I think we also have a connection with it through the modeling paradigms we're doing now, which are not as available, I would say, certainly in other forms. So.
Interesting. Thank you. Danny, I think you have a question. Yeah.
So thinking about the future, 2020, maybe 2025, what are our professions going to look like? Is it going to be a melting pot where we have to know everything and be able to do everything? or will there be certain experts?
I could jump in real quick on this one, I think, because I think everybody that's involved in our space, whatever this space is, if you want to call it data management, data warehousing, BI, whatever, I think we all take 2 huge steps into the business over this 4-year window. And you said 2020 or 2025, but I think even just 2020, we're taking huge steps into the business. And I think in those areas, if you're an ETL developer, you're not going to be just on the technical side of that ETL and looking at a source and a mapping. You're going to have to be considering how the business is using it and how it's being applied and what it means, especially as we get into the integration with big data platforms. If you're in the requirements area, if you're in the program management area, if you're in the architecture area, all these things have to get that much closer to the business. Even our kind of emphasis on conceptual and logical modeling. So I think that changes our roles. One of the things about big data that's interesting is all of us feel maybe a little threatened as modelers because, hey, now it's schema on read, so we don't need to create models, right? You've heard that, right? Who's not heard that? Right, see, there you go. No one's not heard that, so that's one of the conversations. I think the other side to look at is big data create fantastic awareness and much more emphasis and money being spent on data, which means, wow, there's a boom for data, and we're in the data business. It should be really good for all of us in the future, I think. The thing is, what are we going to be doing? And I think it's much more conceptual, logical, and getting things put together. So.
Okay. Another question here. I'll do here and then here.
I have a question about the development of Data Vault outside of Scandinavia and Holland and countries like that, because I'm working for a bank in Holland, and there's an office from the UK assisting us with many people, and they are very against Data Vault, so we have to explain them that all Dutch banks and insurance companies are using it, but they come from a country where it's obviously not very done. They are a highly famous company from Holland, from London. And also if you go to US conferences and like a SQL Server conference, you're coming from Holland, you have to explain Data Vault. We're talking like it's common practice, but I'm just very curious because the guys knowing it, and also anchor modeling, in my environment we don't discuss it basically. I've seen it last year, it looks very interesting, but it's not really that you are going to be certified for it in Holland or you're going to find a job with it. I think, because it could be wrong, although it's very nice. So I'm just curious, we are with a bunch of people here, but you would expect much more other countries, like big countries or outside of this, very specific. What do you think? How
Is the question, why isn't it getting to that level yet?
Oh, what will you think it will change? That's the question, basically. Is it, or are the rest of the world basically doing something else? Like,
I think it's, if you look at anchor modeling, it's a more recent technique than Data Vault, so we haven't really gotten as far as Data Vault has when it comes to adoption. And I've been saying that we've been around in the spreading the word phase for a few years now. And we're now, I think, starting to see implementations pop up everywhere. But we're still like, I'm maybe aware of less than 100 implementations of anchor modeling. And you should also know that anchor modeling is not only a technique for data warehousing, you can use it also as a systems database. So I'm seeing about equal amounts of system databases and anchor modeled databases. Still though, looking what it looked like a couple of years ago, there's like 10 times more implementations now. So it's really, there's a momentum, but we're still small, no doubt about it.
Just a quick point. I think my guess is that there's probably 1,200 plus deployments of Vault or Vault projects going. I'm not, it's really hard to lock it in, of course. There's no law that says do Vault, must call and tell us or anything like that. But based on just the experience of traveling around the world and meeting people, it's not uncommon at all to meet someone for the first time. I'm working on my 5th Vault, okay, great, who are you, So it does kind of happen that way. I think one encouraging thing is just observing the growth and kind of the stickiness of it. So if someone really gets into vaulting and they understand how it works, they apply it in a good way, they maybe get some advice to make sure they haven't gone off, the farm too far, they don't usually drop it. I mean, it's very rare to hear of a company that deploys Vault and then goes back to, no, I'm going to go back to third normal. That suited me better. You're not going to find that. So I think we're probably seeing it. Again, I would say by 2020, the predominant technique for all data warehouse projects will be some form of ensemble. I think that's a good estimation. So,
You want my opinion? Okay. I guess that's why I'm up here, huh? All right, so my opinion, and I'll try to keep this as short as possible. I think the market has been long awaiting me to produce a serious book like the Lifecycle Toolkit book for Data Vault. And it's finally here. So this is part plug, but also part explanation. The book is being printed as we speak and should be available. It's available on Amazon as pre-order. So it's called Building a Scalable Data Warehouse with Data Vault 2.0. And it's 687 pages long, co-authored with my partner, business partner, Michael Olszynski over here. So 2 years in the writing and the making. Is soup to nuts, end to end. So I think to answer your question, that was one reason why the uptake's been slow. Another reason is that people just, in the UK, it's been a very strange thing. I've had some indications. There are places in the UK that are inside of the classified environments that are using Vault with great success. And they belong to the government agencies, which I can't talk about. Commercially, the UK has been standoffish. No one knows why. But I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that there's a lack of material, serious and solid material around the principles behind it. So that's kind of it. There is a bit of history with the UK as well as France from a former consulting company who shall remain nameless at this point. If you want to know more, see me at dinner and we'll talk a little bit about it. I'd be happy to tell you about it. But I think the uptake is going to grow dramatically now that the new book's available. Hans and I are both seeing a tremendous rise all over the world with Data Vault, as far as Singapore, China, Japan, Australia, New Zealand. You were in the EMEA recently down in Saudi Arabia. So there's a lot of uptake. It's going to happen. I'm starting to get requests from the outsourcing companies in India, which indicate to me that customers are starting to push their consulting houses. The other thing that you see is if you look at job listing services, you're going to see a lot of jobs out there for Data Vault experience. So it is taking off with good reason, and that's just my opinion.
So you were talking a bit about geography, what areas are taking off.
Yes.
What about industry? Do you see, building on your question, is there certain industries that haven't jumped into it yet? Are there certain ones you think by 2020 are going to be really hot? What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. In my opinion, and Hans can help with this as well, but in my opinion, the industries I've been involved with in the last 5-6 years have been serious banking industries as well as insurance industry. Those that need fraud and security assurances and auditability have really picked up Vault, and it's always been that way from the beginning. Aside from government, and government's its own strange beast. They need Vault for different reasons. And if you're in government, see me later and we'll talk. But the point is, that's been the main crux of it. Over the past couple years, I've seen a rise in insurance companies and financial services companies and a variety of healthcare industries starting to use it. So it's starting to proliferate. But again, I think it's a lack of a serious heavyweight compendium that gives people the knowledge they need.
It seems to start with banking, financial services, insurance, that area, when you get into a new region. And then from there it grows out. And I think now, just the last few years, more manufacturing and retail than we've seen before. And always some kind of steady flow of government one way or the other. So there's that.
I think it's, I have a theory that it's early adoption. I mean, the Netherlands, they've always been known to be early adopters, even way, way, way back. And I also think that banks and insurance companies were among the first ones to actually go into data warehousing when data warehousing became a concept. So they have a longer history than other industries, or certain countries have longer histories of being early adopters of new techniques. So that's why I think we're seeing different level of maturity and different levels of adoption in different geographical and industrial areas.
Interesting. Thank you. Sure.
Database systems at this point, I've not come across one that is optimized for ensemble techniques. Do you guys evangelize these techniques to database vendors like Oracle, Teradata, Vertica, and the likes?
Yeah, I can answer that. And see, it's interesting that you mentioned Vertica. For those who don't know it, Vertica is a massive parallel processing but relational database. And I recently was involved in a project where we had contact with HP with respect to this, because it turned out that the concepts that we have, the building blocks in anchor modeling, mapped really well to the way you distribute data over the clusters in a node that you have in those massive parallel processing environments. And to the point where previously you had to fine-tune Vertica for every type of query that you wanted to answer, to where it's now possible to actually do ad hoc querying with less fine-tuning. So I'm involved right now with discussions with HP where to go with this. I've tried to have some discussions with Microsoft with respect to SQL Server, and it's so-so. I'd say about 50% of the feature requests that I want pop up over time, and 50% they close and won't fix, or yeah, you know, the drill.
Great. Thank you. Any other comments on that?
Yeah, my experience has been very similar. However, my experience is that, first off, the data vault is about 3.5 normal form, if you could call it that. And that's not a name I gave it. That's something that Claudia Imhoff labeled it years ago. So if you're interested in why or where, talk to Claudia. But the point is it's a normalized format. Data vault can make use of star join optimizers. And why people don't understand that, I don't know. Now, I'm not talking about anybody in this room, okay? Obviously, you guys are here because you're smarter than the average bear. So don't tell anyone outside this room I said that, right? I'm sorry, I'm punchy. I apologize. But that's the nature of it. That's the nature of it. So the vendors, in my experience, the vendors won't implement a solution until their customers push. The customers have to say, I've done this, I want to use this, and it's failing here. You need to fix it inside the core. So, and I've tried to talk to vendors, and they turn a deaf ear, much like to Lars. You know, if there's a perfect fit and you're already in one of their largest customers, then they'll go ahead and do it. Like, for instance, one of my biggest customers with Data Vault 2.0 today is also one of Teradata's largest customers today, and they happen to be a financial institution. And even now, they're not making concessions to make the Data Vault work better for this customer, even though they want this customer to succeed. So you got to ask the question, why aren't the vendors listening? Well, it has to do with the customer base not pushing hard enough. So it's nothing Lars and I can or can't do, and we've tried, as you've just heard. It has to do more with the customer base.
Interesting.
My question is to do with data discovery and data wrangling, two topics that you'll see a lot of in the press. So the word discovery and data discovery implies that somewhere the schema got lost and needs to be rediscovered. Do you think those techniques, is data discovery a new way of doing reverse engineering and perhaps looking at the data and linking it back to a meaningful business conceptual model? Interested in your thoughts around that.
The simple answer from my experience is we've got a whole lot of new terms that mean the same thing as the old terms. Data discovery to me is nothing more than data profiling. Data wrangling, well, that brings to mind something, an old US song says, Mama, don't let your kids grow up to be cowboys, right? So data wrangling, well, that is more what they throw another label, self-service BI, which is ridiculous. But anyway, anybody remember EII, Enterprise App Integration Information? Right? That's another way of calling federated query. I like to call that EIEIO. But the whole point is this. Data wrangling is a new set of tools that bring together structure analysis, profiling, and some form of business intelligence engines. And some of them have some neural net processing, which is cool. So it's cool technology. We got new terms for old stuff. And really, that's all it is to me. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've always had, profiling, we've always had mining and exploration, and we've had more structured management of the data asset. And I think we'll continue to have that. I think right now you probably see more action on the side of like that data discovery side for profiling and or mining and exploration, just with the tool sets and the big data platforms that are out there. And I think, as of today, all the major database vendors still see that as, two side-by-side architectures that have their own purpose. So definitely more of it.
Hi, one question. Does IBM Watson is a challenge or a threat for us as data modelers?
What did you say? Is it a what?
IBM Watson.
Yeah.
Is that a challenge or a threat?
Neither. Neither. IBM Watson is a glass box. If you throw enough stones, it will fall down. However, IBM Watson is interesting. It learns a lot of things. It does a lot of things. There's an awful lot of humans running around making it work. So it is, and I've talked to some friends who work on the Watson project, and they're excited, and they're learning a lot of new things. There will be some innovation coming from that project for sure, and it will change the industry going forward. But Watson itself, it's kind of a novelty toy today. And the reason why I say that is how many Watsons has IBM produced and sold? That's when the real test begins. As soon as IBM introduces Watson to multiple customers and begins selling it as an appliance, that's when it's going to change our jobs. Okay? That's my opinion. But it all depends on when IBM decides to make that transition.
Yeah. Will it be Watson or Siri at that point?
Yes, Siri's in the running.
Going to take over everything else.
Yeah. Maybe Siri will marry Watson. Who knows? I'm not... Yeah, right.
This is a similar question to the one you just answered about database vendors. What about data modeling tool vendors and their almost complete lack of support for modern database design approaches like Data Vault and Data Anchor modeling? Do you think they're going to hold you back? Are you putting a lot of pressure on the vendors to actually build in support?
Where's Marco in the room?
Yeah, well, I can start with that one. No, I'm not putting any pressure on any vendors when it comes to adopting anchor modeling in their tools. And the reason for that is that I realized when we started doing anchor modeling, we're not going to get it through that way. The only way we're going to get adoption for anchor modeling is to develop our own tool, release it for free as open source, because that's the only way we're going to break into this crowd of data modeling people with a new technique. But with respect to your question, if it's holding us back a little bit, I think so, surely, because let's say you have Power Designer or Embarcadero or Irwin or something like that, then, well, you will have to get some other tool if you want to do anchor modeling, which, of course, means that someone will have to make that decision. And that's not always that easy.
And the thing is, you can use, I think with the Vault side, you can use any of these tools for the purpose of modeling your Vault. Obviously, it's not a problem, but you're not going to see the nice pull down of Hub, Link, and Sat coming off the list. Not now, but probably in the same window as we're seeing the adoption really kick in now. You'll see more of that popping into the tools, I'm sure. And of course, there's some tools that are thinking about it and discussing it now, and in various forms of getting it out there. But
There's actually, if I may, there's actually, Steve, may I mention a vendor name who's here? Sure. Okay. There is a vendor name that I've been working with, but not because I pushed it on him. The vendor is MID. Michael Mueller, where are you? Raise your hand. Stand up. I really want to give MID a shout because they came to our conference, or my conference on Data Vault. They sought me out. And then Michael had the vendor they have a data modeling tool, they have a business process modeling tool, and a concept modeling tool. It's all in one stack. So it is a beautiful solution. And you can build directly with data vaults. In fact, you can even go to the generation stage of SQL down in the lower levels, which is really quite nice. And they put the efforts in over the last, what, 3 years? 2, 3 years? 2 years to build Data Vault support directly into the tool. So I just wanted to put that out there. They're one of the only vendors that have come to me. Now, CA or Irwin has come to me, but as soon as they realized that Data Vaults are inherently, quote unquote, supported by standard modeling practices, they sort of gave up the ghost on that one and said, okay, you can have a copy of Irwin and run with it. But it's not native support for Data Vault. And yeah, we have a bit, in the Data Vault landscape, we have a bit of an easier time with these modeling tools because we are a little bit more normalized than, or we fit in the third normal form space, which is similar to what these tools already do. So that's the answer there.
Is there questions? So,
how do you see the data ownership going? I mean, there's a lot of talking about the business has to take responsibility over the data, and from my experience, the business still talks about data as an IT thing. What do you thought? What thoughts do you have about that?
That's a good question, and I've got a small story, a real-life story case study to tell about that. I've been working with this particular bank. It's one of my, as I mentioned earlier, it's one of my largest running. It's a 4-year effort. It's an enterprise-wide effort at the bank. And the CFO stood up in the all-hands meeting 6 months after implementation and said, this is the first time in the history of this company that I can balance the books within 0.1% because of the Data Vault. And what he meant was he understood where that data was, and he also said he knew where the error was. And this is the result, or the short answer to your question is getting business to be accountable for their data and their information, not just the data set, but the information, and understanding the process of how the model stores the information and delivers it to the business. That's critical. So when I go into a company and teach these kinds of things, these are the types of things that I teach the company how to do. And I work with the business users to make that happen. In this particular case, I was in with the directors and the CFO from the beginning. So they knew what they were getting into. They knew they would expose the problems and the issues in their data and their data quality. And it got much deeper than that. We actually got into TQM, or total quality management, which includes the round trip that you have to make that work. So that's my short story. If you guys want to know more, I've got hundreds of those kinds of things where Data Vault projects have really made a difference. Anybody, let me just ask this, anybody when you were a kid like to play down by the stream like, and pull up a rock and like maybe catch tadpoles or frogs? Well, I did. What happens when you open up a rock or pick up a rock and you let the sun shine down underneath the rock? What do you see under there? Bugs, right? Normally lots of bugs, and as soon as the sunlight hits them, where do they all go? Right? They scatter. This is much the same way as enterprise data warehouses that expose the true nature of the way businesses operate. And I've even been told in some cases, you're not allowed to disclose those numbers from your Data Vault. We know you found them, but you're not allowed to disclose them because we don't want to know that answer. That's dangerous. You want to run from that company as fast as possible because guaranteed you're going to be held accountable or liable. But when you can turn it into a success, have those business users be accountable for what they understand, then that's a good thing. But that's been my experience. You guys have any thoughts to add?
It's exactly the same. You don't want to own that which you don't trust, because it can put you in a bad spot at some time. So we see that a lot. But that's usually when they have data warehouses with poor data quality or poor design, where they couldn't stick to a paradigm, so it's become a mess of quick and dirty fixes, stuff like that. No one wants to touch that mess. So that's a problem. But I haven't seen a problem with data ownership once they've used anchor modeling in my case.
Right.
Then people, as soon as they start to trust the information, then it's okay to own it as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think even outside of building a warehouse that can expose these things from a more proactive perspective now, if you look at business, there's much more awareness around the importance of data than there was 5-10 years ago. Data governance initiatives, master data management initiatives. I think these are just growing areas in the business and are moving closer to business. So I'm optimistic. Maybe I'm, kind of eternal optimist when it comes to this kind of stuff, but it really seems like it's trending to be more, the business owns that data and owns the modeling of that data to some degree, and they understand that it's not just a technical discussion. So hopefully that continues.
Building on that question though, so 2020, where do you see the role blending between data scientists and data modeler? Do you see that there is a blend going on there, or do you think that there'll be two distinct roles by then? What are your thoughts?
Oh, wow. I mean, I think you need bits and pieces of both, right? I think data modeling is still data modeling, and I think our roles change, but we're going to continue to have that professional and more conceptual logical level. I think the data scientist role is obviously a little bit more business facing, a little more skill set on understanding what data means and how to build the right statistical models to understand it, which is good. But all that, I think, just becomes more of our business tool set. I think if you think about it now, anyone in business runs a spreadsheet and does their own word processing. And of course, there wasn't too long ago that was done by techies for someone else, right? So I think eventually we get those skills directly in the business roles where we understand lots of what's now data science, I think.
Interesting. Thanks. Great. Another question? So I have one more. So you mentioned the benefit of building a broad model, a conceptual or logical. Are you seeing the phrase enterprise data model a lot in your assignments now? And do you think that term, enterprise data model, is going to become more or less popular by 2020?
Yeah.
I haven't heard it in the last 5 years.
Interesting.
My customers don't even speak the phrase. In fact, most of my customers are trying to get away from that. They're running, they understand the conceptual level of the model for the enterprise, but they're done with it. They're so done with it because they're experiencing problems with growth and they can't get past them, and they're experiencing problems with auditability and they can't get past them. In fact, those are the technologies they're trying to sunset. So I don't hear them do that. They also say, well, we want to learn agile and we want to be agile and we want to be focused. Like Hans said, we want to change the models as we go, and also Lars, we want to be organic in growth. And so they're running from those concepts as fast as possible. The end of the day, they're saying, yes, we have a business to run. We need to know what the business is overall. We don't need our microphones falling off. But that's just what I hear.
Okay. Yeah. No, I think enterprise data model is probably something they're going towards, but they don't realize it. I think the word, definitely, you don't hear it spoken. I don't so much anymore. Industry reference models, but that was our topic a little bit earlier. Was a lot of things that we worked with in those areas. I think they can't fit into our new agile requirement, which is not going away. So that's going to be interesting. I think one thing we discuss is this idea of the first iteration kind of conceptual model. And you can say information model, logical model, conceptual model wiki, whatever you want to call it. Look at kind of the first phases of the BEAM method with Lawrence Core or something like that, where how do you just get a feel for what is going on in this organization and identify the core concepts. And that gets down to what we've done in the past, person, place, thing, event. What are the things that we work with? And ultimately, we need to track data and keep data around those concepts. There's so many projects I think you could have saved years of heartache if you had just committed 2 weeks in the beginning to just literally walk around the business and ask people, what do you do here? And literally just listen for the concepts that come up and write them down. A very simple thing. The things that come up all the time are the things that are going to be the foundation of the requirements they have for Marts, because it's about what they do. It's how the data is going to be captured when they build their application. It's where the data should be stored when you store it in a warehouse. It's that level, I think, is critical. And you don't need to have a 5-year deployment of an industry reference model or a massively detailed enterprise data model to make that happen. You can just take a piece, start going with it. And wow, 80-20 rule, it's probably the 95-5 rule as far as benefit to a project to do that. So. Okay, thank you.
No, I see, what I see is that you need to have some sort of dictionary where you explain your different concepts. And I never either hear them call it enterprise data model. It's just the dictionary, or it has some funny name like the frog or something like that. Who knows? Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. Question here.
So does that mean that we're going back to islands? Like Mercedes Beetle, is it going to be a small thing or a lot of small things to make the big thing?
I think there's a huge difference between that and the incremental build. I think the thing that's being offered by all the techniques you see represented here is the idea that you can build in increments, but the end result still looks as though and works as though you had known about all the requirements from the beginning. So it all fits together. I think that's the big difference here is to truly build incrementally. That means at the end, when it's more complete, it should look like it would have looked like if you had done it from the beginning, if you knew everything. So, yeah.
From my customer perspective, Danny, the answer would be no. My customers are all executing, maybe not properly, but they're attempting to execute governance and metadata control or master metadata, which includes business glossaries. And they're even going to the point where they're attaching estimations of value. If you don't meet this requirement and can't fill this piece of metadata, here's the loss of money that you might, or the estimate of money that you might lose if you don't fill this properly or finish this particular piece. So it's quite an interesting story. In fact, one of my customers is going to present at one of IBM's upcoming conferences in Vegas, the big one, on this very story. So I don't think we're going to return to islands. And most of my customers, as I said, they initiate metadata management and they start down the path of governance. Now, they're not fully mature, but they're working on it.
I think adaptation is the name of the game in the future. If you're going to have a successful company, you're going to have to adapt much quicker than you've ever had before. And the master of adaptation is evolution.
Yeah.
So if you can't evolve with your models, with your technique, then you won't adapt.
So we have time for one more question. So can each of you share with the audience what can people do for their career to get ready for 2020? Is there any tips or advice you can provide to help us for 2020?
Are we out of time? Was that?
We're getting pretty close, though. We have about one more minute, so you each get 33 seconds.
Yet?
20 seconds. 20 seconds each.
I mean, yeah, since it's kind of dead air, I'll start just from my level. I think, again, I'm kind of an optimist, so it kind of depends on where you see and hope things will be going in that time frame and what kind of job roles. But I would encourage, I think, everyone, wherever you are today, getting one step further into the soft business skills to some degree, no matter what your job role is today. I think that's going to bode well for where you're going. I think that's going to be helpful for all of us.
There's actually a facilitation class. I think it's tomorrow, actually, so that would be a really good...
a facilitation and training course with some good details there. Probably be a good one to go to. I think that's going to benefit all of us greatly as we move closer towards the business. And then, of course, just, I think people want to say, should I be getting certified in HDFS so I can do work? And, honestly, I think there's always going to be 10 of those things in the next few years that pop up. It's probably more understanding how to apply it from a general sense. And that gets back to our skills as modelers. We model to help people understand things, to make it easier to understand something. And as we get into more complexity with platforms, and we're a little bit more business driven, we can really be relied upon to help the business, to help them model to understand what they're working with. So, yeah.
I also think that we have a little bit of a golden era right now with the new ensemble techniques. And what these techniques have done is to actually uncover some aspects of information that we didn't really think about how to model earlier, but we now think of and can model in intelligent ways. So I think that's also, from a business perspective, I think that's requirements that's probably out there, but we haven't really taken care of them because we haven't really had a really good framework for how to manage that, like temporality, history, how to deal with reliability, how to deal with concurrency, trustworthiness, lots of these things.
Thank you.
All right. My advice, go get trained in Agile. It's going to come. If you are going to focus on NoSQL, you definitely need training. Yes, there will be 10 different things that pop up. But in order to understand NoSQL, you need training. But find a platform and stick to it. Become an expert in it. And I think I echo Hans' sentiments as well. Learn the business. Learn the business. Whatever business you're in, go find out how to talk to business users and understand it. It will help you invaluably in your entire career.
Thank you. All right, thanks everybody. Thank you guys. And